Jennifer Ehalt is the Senior Education Manager at Common Sense Education. She has over 20 years of experience in education. Her main focus is working with districts, schools, and community organizations with the goal of building a culture of digital citizenship across all grade levels. Welcome back, Jennifer. We're ready to learn more with you.
Hello. What a wonderful welcome. That was just beautiful. I'm like in awe. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to AI Literacy Lesson Collection by Common Sense Education. And I want to quickly introduce my colleague and dearest friend, Sue Thoughts, who's the Director of Outreach for Common Sense Education. She is based in LA, but I'll let you talk, Sue.
Oh, I already threw it in the chat. I said, hey, Melinda, I'm one of your neighbors. I grew up in Warrensburg, in central Illinois, outside Decatur. And my dad also taught at Argenta Orienta. So I am an Illinois native and a central Illinoisan at heart. So yes, that's where I am from. But I've been living here in Los Angeles for the last 9 years. So, and working with Common Sense for the last 12 years, right alongside Jennifer.
It's amazing. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. It's going to be a really great conversation around the following idea of how do I prepare my students for a world of AI. There's lots of ways you can take a dive into this topic around AI literacy. Is it AI for educators? Is it AI for students? But we are going to make this really easy and digestible for you today. We would love to just kind of think about some of our new lessons. We want to showcase them. We want you to experience them and sort of be immersed in our conversation around preparing for, inviting AI into your classroom, so to speak. Mm-hmm. We also want to think about the digital citizenship foundational resources, a lot of the things you've already been doing, and then using the best tools, right, for the things you want to get done. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sue as she kicks things off for us.
Yeah. So, on that last slide, Jennifer just showed that today we're going to be talking about, trying to get teachers to think about what does AI mean to them? How are they going to use this in their own lives? Maybe not necessarily with their students right away, but what does this mean about your own practice and how do you incorporate AI into your lives? And what considerations do you need to think about? And how do you create that culture in your schools and in your districts? So, we saw this article in Ed Week recently, and, it says that 43% of teachers thinks it's important to teach students AI literacy. And I said, that's probably general population. But of course, we have our, everybody here today probably thinks, you probably have 100% of teachers in this space today who think it's important to teach about AI literacy because that's probably why you're all here, right? So, in the next slide, we talk a little bit about this idea that, teaching digital citizenship is necessary for preparing our students for this world of AI. And when we talk about digital citizenship, we talk about, a whole variety of skills. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, including, we think about privacy or cyberbullying or digital identity or these kinds of things. But essentially, we try to get our kids to kind of slow down, before they respond online, seeking facts and evidence, considering the perspective of other people, thinking about what kind of options they have when it comes to their online spaces, and then having the ability, the bravery, the wherewithal to be able to take action. So this is what we talk about when we talk about digital citizenship and some of the dispositions. A lot of these all apply to the way in which we think about AI and exploring the impacts and values that you bring along into that classroom, into our personal spaces, into our society. And how does this technology of artificial intelligence, how does the technology that we hold in our hands every single day, or the social media spaces that we're in, or any of these other things, how do they have an impact on our well-being? So we are going to take today to kind of look at this from a teacher perspective. And then we're also going to share a little bit about how we want to think about this when it comes to working with our students. So with all of this, I just wanted to introduce some of the new lessons that we have available at Common Sense. Recently, with all of this AI that's all around us, we wanted to make sure that we are sharing some lessons and ideas about how to have these conversations in your classroom. And so we've developed all of these lessons here. And again, if you're unfamiliar with Common Sense, all these resources are available for free. They're all free to use. They're all listed under Creative Commons. And so we have a link that Matt so kindly put into the chat that brings you directly to these lessons, and you'll see the titles all up there related to what is AI, how is AI trained, social emotional dimension of AI, and we'll get to some of these today. So yeah, so that's, I don't know, Jennifer, you got anything else to say about all these lessons here?
No, I'm just excited to showcase them, and I can honestly say the more you talk about these topics, these dilemmas, these activities, the better it feels and the easier it gets. So the confidence building is real.
Yeah. And this isn't necessarily like, here is how to use AI, right? We're not going to talk about, we don't talk about that necessarily in these lessons, or, here's how you start with ChatGPT. These are about basic foundations of what is AI. How is this trained? How does this work? What is our relationship with chatbots, for example? So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And so it's more about the culture and preparing us to think about the impacts of AI on our lives. So, all those lessons, by the way, are a short 15 to 20 minutes. And so this is an example. Oftentimes when I show this to teachers, and I try to just get teachers all on the same baseline. You are, if you're an administrator, if you're a teacher who's just like, what is it that we're talking about here, right? This is a short 3-minute video that is found within that very first lesson of what is AI, right? So if I can imagine if I was an administrator, if I was a teacher and I said, all right, everybody, let's take a watch of this very short animated video. And maybe I share this before a staff meeting, and I say, I use that framing that's listed over there on the right. This video will give you a brief overview of what is AI. I want you to watch and see if the definition of this video matches what you think you know about AI, and then be prepared at our next PLN meeting or something to share your thoughts about what you just learned and how this might impact your life, right? So 3-minute video. It was designed for students, by the way, but I think it applies to adults too, because it's just a simple animated video explaining AI. Yeah. And so I've been using this dilemma a lot in professional developments. And what I like about this dilemma, let's read it. I'm gonna have you read it, Jennifer.
Okay.
And then we're gonna talk a little bit about it. So kick it off.
All right. Some principals in your district have been using generative AI to write teacher evaluations. They highlighted that this was a huge time saver and recommend it to other principals. What are your thoughts?
Okay.
You think it's a good use of, a professional use, making time more efficient, getting your to-do list done? Or do you fall on the other side of the line there, not a professional use of technology?
So those of you who feel comfortable today, giving us your thoughts, feel free to, throw your thoughts in the comments there. If you were I've been doing this for the last couple of weeks with real people in a real room. And the way that I have them do this is I've seen couple hundred teachers and administrators and librarians for the last couple of weeks, and I project this onto the wall. And I say, if you feel like this is not a professional use of technology, you go to this side of the room. If you feel like this is a great use of AI, you go to this side of the room. And I watch to see where everybody kind of falls in line. And then I have them turn to a partner and explain why they're in that position. So if you are feeling bold, by all means, feel free to add your own comment about where you would be in that room. But, Jennifer, I think what I find to be most interesting is people are all over the place. Like, they are on one extreme, they are on the other extreme, and then there are also a lot of folks that are somewhere in between, maybe leaning one way or maybe leaning the other. But the thing is that I think is very interesting is pretty much everybody shares, right? Like, so maybe Matt's like over here, great way to make their lives more efficient, but, right. But Matt might have a but in there, right? Because he might say, toward the right, but not all the way. Like, I like the use of AI, but here are the considerations you need to make. So I'm sure Matt would share the considerations as well as why he thinks it's a good use. Right. And the argument probably goes something like this. And tell me if I'm wrong, Matt. The argument is something like, it's great because it's a great efficiency tool. As an administrator, I would want to make sure that maybe I would put in some good data. I'd observe the teacher, put in some good observations that I make about my teacher, but I would use the AI to create a narrative. Maybe that AI would even be able to give some suggestions about how to improve. Maybe I would use it to make sure that writing is clear and understandable. Or maybe if it's kind of harsh, I would soften the language. The output should still be personalized to the individual scenario. Exactly. You want to make it personal, right? You want to make it useful and meaningful to that person who you're observing. Now, on the other side, somebody who's leaning toward the left might say, I just don't want a cookie cutter, evaluation that doesn't mean anything to me. I want this feedback so that I can improve. I want to make sure that what is input is personal to me. And so I'm opposed to just being like given a cookie cutter kind of evaluation that isn't meaningful. Right. So oftentimes I hear the same thing all the way across the room, whether it comes from somebody on the right or somebody on the left. Right. So what's really interesting is not, where it's interesting that people are all the way across, but they all kind of say the same thing. We want the AI to make our lives more efficient and easier, but it depends on good input. Right. So that's what we often start off with. Yeah. And then oftentimes I get this question.
I mean, oftentimes, often.
Every time I get this question.
I think artificial intelligence and whether or not plagiarism and how plagiarism plays a role in this has been top of mind since the beginning. The launch of this, and it's been a hot topic. And so we wanted to introduce one of our lessons that we have that you see here for middle and high. We wanted to walk you through a scenario, to sort of highlight artificial intelligence and the use of it in an assignment. So this happens to be original author dilemma from this lesson. So Ada has a writing assignment due tomorrow. She hasn't started writing it. She heard on social media about a tool that can create an outline or of an entire paper by just using a simple prompt. She decides to use the tool to help her finish her assignment on time. So she types the assignment prompt into the tool, and the tool generates a 5-paragraph essay. Ada reviews the essay that the tool wrote. She changes a few words throughout the paper and writes a new conclusion paragraph based on the information she learned in class. Ada submits the assignment to the teacher on time. So here is our question for you. Was it okay that Ada used this tool for the assignment? Okay or no way?
Yeah. So I've been doing this lesson with teachers for about a year now, right? For the whole school year.
Yep.
And once again, we have teachers oftentimes on both sides of the room and then everywhere in the middle. And so I've been doing this a lot with teachers. I've done it a couple of times with students. And what I think is important is when we do this activity, I want to hear the reasons why people are standing where they are. And where is it acceptable? Like, I think a lot of folks find these tools, we use Grammarly a lot. We use a lot of supports when it comes to writing, especially for our students who need that kind of support, or who, our kids with IEPs who need, sentence starters and the ability to be able to scaffold some of this process. And so, we're kind of like, where is that line? How few is a few words throughout the paper, right? Where is the line between putting in the prompt and then just taking the output and handing it directly into the teacher, right? And writing the whole thing yourself. Where on that line do we as educators feel like it's acceptable and not acceptable? How do we identify what that space is, and how do we communicate that to our students? So what are these questions here?
So with Matt already kicking us off with, boy, we got to go a little deeper with this dilemma, which sparks wonderful conversation in a room, right? I mean, these are great for your staff meetings or any type of PLNNs that you come together with. But, here are just some questions to throw out to the group. What if Ada cited the tool as a resource in her assignment? Does that change your place on the line, right? Or does that change your place on the side of the room? Yes or no? What if Ada used the tool to create an outline, but then wrote the entire paper herself? And so we see this a lot in conversation around, it's just a brainstorm tool. It's like a jumping off point to kind of get warmed up for the assignment and think, get your sort of head wrapped around the topic or what you want to write or portray with throughout this essay. And what if Ada's teacher used the same tool to give students feedback on their essays? There's one. Everybody gets to use AI, right?
Right. So I think part of this is, identifying, where is your line? How do you communicate this with your students? The other point that gets brought up all the time when I bring this up is, what was the assignment for? Right. So what was the intention of the assignment? What were you trying to do with this assignment? And so, if you look back at the prompt, it's, if you're a teacher who conveys, I want to make sure everything is in on time, it's either in on time or it's a 0. Well, then I'm like, well, Ada really used her resources to really get
Where's that tool? Where is that tool?
Exactly. She pulled that tool out because that's what she knows her teacher values. What are you conveying as a teacher about what is the intention of this assignment? What am I trying to help you learn? What is our point here? Right. So I feel like, the next slide really talks about plagiarism questions to consider. So if you're having conversations about AI, cheating, plagiarism in your classroom, I feel like these 4 points are really kind of interesting.
I know this one was helpful for me the first time I saw some of these questions that we often think to ourselves but don't say out loud, especially around what types of PD or support do you need to update these assignments or these different assessments. And teachers are very humble, right? It's okay to ask. It's okay to think about how you can work together in teams to create, different assignments using AI, and what would that look like? How do we turn this assignment we've been doing for a couple of years now, where the students are getting a lot out of it, but now with AI, how can we enhance it? How can we change it up so that if they tend to go out and use AI, there are more guidelines around it? And so these are all things that will come in time. I don't think it's something that you can just solve overnight. It's really about getting to know your students, what engages them, what excites them, and how do they document the use of some of the things that they use on the internet, whether it's AI related or not. And so these are just great things, again, to incorporate into some of your conversations with your peers in thinking about what works for them.
I thought it was interesting. I had a few folks say, am I trying to evaluate your writing skills? Because, instead of assigning a 5-paragraph essay, there's a lot that I can evaluate based on you and a pencil and, sitting down and writing something in class right there, right? Mm-hmm. Is it about creating that outline? Is it about creating that structure? Is it about identifying good resources? How do I help hone the intention of the assignment for each of my students? It's oftentimes I often get English teachers on one side of the room as opposed to the other. So these are these are the ones that tend to sometimes push against some of these AI tools. It's not always, obviously. I've got a whole variety of folks, but people who are trying to teach writing, you might have to rethink about the way that you teach writing, given the fact that these tools write very well, on behalf of these students. And how can we maybe consider starting with the prompt, dumping it in, perhaps saying, all right, here is what the AI spit out. Let's research and verify all this information. Let's figure out, how could we improve upon this? How do we use this, this output in order to be able to identify, where we can improve this, right? So maybe it's a different way of writing an assignment, I'm sure, as many of you understand. Yeah,
exactly. And it's about learning a new tool. Right? We had to teach ourselves how to use social media. And now we're navigating social media and modeling it with our students, right? And so there's different aspects of technology. AI happens to be the newest, right? So we still are learning. We're still building confidence. We're still, having to figure out ways to model it in the classroom. So it's a no, we're not using it. It's a yes, we're using it, but here are my guidelines, here are my expectations, my routines, my norms around this. And so I think over time you all will get there. And if you have gotten there, please, we would love to know, or see what's working for some of you who have been affected by this more quickly than others in different settings.
Right. So I think the National History Day guidelines, their AI guidance, we just found this as one example of, some guidance that has been produced by an organization, and, talked about effective use of AI, right? What are the best ways that you can use some of these generative AI tools, such as ChatGPT or Bard? And, I use it all the time for brainstorming. I'm terrible at coming up with titles for my sessions or session descriptions, right? I will enter, like, here are my lesson objectives. Here are the things that, that I'm trying to do, write me a session description for this, right? And I'll take that language because that language is great. Make it sound more academic, make it sound more readable, right? Make it sound more fun, right? You can
more fun is mine all the time. Like, make this sound like someone wants to really come learn about this.
Right. So, if you're looking for resources, or if you're trying to get a summary of something, if you're trying to understand grammar and punctuation and review something, simplifying language into a different reading level, these are all great ways that you can use the generative AI tools. But we caution folks a lot about using AI tools in a way that, lets the AI be the expert, right? So you don't want to depend upon it for gathering information, letting it do analysis, because it sources, a whole variety of stuff that is, good stuff and bad stuff. Right. So we want to make sure that teachers and students understand what the limitations are with some of these generative AI tools and how to use it, of course, with privacy in mind, with, with resources in mind that can lead into misinformation and bias and all of that good stuff. So yeah,
exactly.
It's not a magic
Matt was so kind to put the link in the chat there for the whole entire document. Obviously, we're showing you a screenshot of just, the way you may or may not use it, but the whole document is really a great starting point for you to think about and kind of model in your classroom. So make sure you grab that link. It's good stuff. Yeah. Okay, we have another dilemma that we want to walk you through. This one happens to be around the idea of chatbots. AI chatbots, who's behind the screen, and AI chatbots and friendships. And so how many of you have had opportunities to talk to a chatbot in the last
few months? The time.
I mean, customer service is probably my biggest use when you have a customer service issue and you go to these different websites of, companies and, ask the chat, and you're like, hey, hi, chatbot. But as adults, we know, we're learning about how there's not a human behind the screen in this program. So how do we have these conversations with our students? And so we wanted to take you through the lesson here and have a conversation around AI chatbots and friendship.
Yeah, I recently did this with a group of sixth graders. So, I've done this a lot with teachers as well, with teachers and administrators. And, we ask the question, the essential question is, how can AI chatbots affect our idea of friendship? And so the first question, on the next slide is about what are the qualities of a good friend? Now, when I asked a group of sixth graders, I sometimes get a very different set of answers than I do when I ask a group of adults. But the way that I do this with adults in a PD is I ask them, think like a sixth grader. I want you to turn to your neighbor and I want you to identify 3 qualities of a good friend, right? And then we list them out. And so, if I was a teacher in a classroom, I might write these up on my board, or I might list them out and share, these are the qualities that we identified of being a good friend. And then, I might share mine. So I have some that are listed here, and maybe we have some on the next slide. We have some here that maybe you've included and maybe you haven't, right? Somebody who's dependable, kind, right? Trustworthy. And so, for all of you, you might have these kinds of ideas about what a good friend is. And for your sixth graders or your 7th or 8th graders, right? They might look very similar or different, right? And then, the next part of this lesson really talks about how important friendship is, right? To all of us. We really appreciate this opportunity to have a good a good person-to-person type of interaction, and we love being able to connect with our friends and use technology to be able to connect with them even when we're not together. So we present then the dilemma. And in this dilemma, we have, Logan. And Logan just moved to a new town and is feeling very lonely. Logan is having a hard time making friends or finding people who share her interests. Logan discovers a new AI chatbot feature on her social media and begins to chat, sharing personal thoughts and feelings with the AI chatbot. Logan discusses her experience moving from town to town, going to a new school, and the struggles making new friends. And over time, Logan's interactions with the AI chatbot become part of her daily routine. Logan is starting to feel really connected up to the chatbot because it always replies back with kindness and no judgment and is always available day or night. So, man, the question that we ask, and I get a different answer from teachers than I do from students, should Logan consider the AI chatbot to be a friend? But, what I do is we all compare Logan's experience with the chatbot to the list we generated, right?
Mhm.
And we identify, does this chatbot share these qualities of a friend? And Jennifer, did you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, they do. I mean, especially, with always there, always present, always kind. I do think that, middle schoolers have a tough time with peer pressure and friendships, and especially moving, constantly and having to make new friends. The idea of it so simply right on my computer in my home or on my phone, or I don't have to be, struggling with these relationships and worrying about who likes me and who doesn't. You get all the things you need from this chatbot.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't Logan want to continue to tap in and say hello every day?
All the things you need. Well, in one of my sessions, one of the students identified that they like to have people who, this was a very evolved student, right? They like to have friends who help them be better, right? They call them
that is very mature.
Very mature, very mature sixth grader, right?
I want to have friends that help me be better.
Right? I think as adults, we understand this. We understand that having critical friends who help us, become better people and question whenever we need to, have some pushback. They question us and they help us consider, when we're in the right or when we're in the wrong, right? So another thing that the students all identified when I did this with students was they identified that Snapchat has a chatbot, has a chatbot feature that many of them have used. And they talk about how they used it. And I, as the old person in the room, was trying to suspend my horror a little bit about, all these students having these relationships with the Snapchat chatbot and, and the way in which they were describing these Snapchat chatbots, which I'm sure if any of you do not know, there is a chatbot on Snapchat and many of your students probably are using it. So, it was interesting for me to try to just hold back a little bit and not be horrified, but also at the same time, be curious and ask my students in that classroom that day about their experience with this chatbot and whether they thought the chatbot should be considered a friend. It's really interesting. I'm not going to say it's always fun, but it's always interesting to hear the perspectives of your students.
Yeah. And I do think it's a comfort zone, maybe / routine for some students who need that and thrive on hey, I know what I'm going to get today when I go in and have this conversation with a chatbot, versus the authentic pieces of sometimes friends being so raw or so real or so honest, and things they don't want to hear. And so, that part was what I was thinking about when you were talking of just the comfort, the knowing what you're getting. Yeah. And the idea of that's not real life, explaining to them that, eventually you do have to face.
But it is real life, Jennifer.
I know, right? So,
So the next slide on here is about, why yes and why no. Yes, dependable, kind, supportive. No, because your chatbot is not empathetic. It isn't authentic, and it can't, it can't be physically there for Logan. Maybe there's other perspectives that we want to share, but to just kind of have some information for our students. A lot of adults that I've talked to said that they really appreciate some of these mental health chatbots that are giving them information and asking them questions about
Right.
how to reflect, right? They don't give answers, but they ask for more questions. And I thought that was interesting because we were like, it's just like a therapist. Like a therapist is not going to give you answers. They just ask you more questions, right? To help you identify, some of your own ideas and help you reflect. So the final answer, or the final slide on this lesson, is about AI chatbots can be meaningful. They can, they can be helpful to us, but it's important to be cautious about relying on them too much, as they can't replace a human friendship. Because what makes friendships unique is that they aren't one-sided, right? We talked about in a few of our sessions about how important it is for us to feel like we're helping our friends, that our friends share with us, and that it feels good to be able to contribute to the lives of others and to be able to be helpful to other people. And certainly, our friends are not perfect, and being able to disagree, make mistakes, right? These are all important parts of being a friend, and being human. And I told everybody, every time I talk about this, I'm like, your students, I hope, have people in their lives that love them, right? Their friends, their family, and to understand the difference between that genuine affection from another human and, having a companion like a chatbot, is an important distinction. And we want our students to identify that genuine human relationship and what makes that special and so needed. So yeah, that's why I like this lesson.
I know. I try to think of myself, in 6th grade or 7th grade, like, way back when, and how would I have taken to these? Because at that age, we are so naive, more naive than not. And we are, everything is, fun. And, it's just interesting because we can wrap our head around this a little easier. So this is a great lesson, because this is something I think that a lot of students don't know what they don't know. And so in some ways you could be opening them up to like, hey, did you know? And we're not shaming if they didn't, but it's a nice, universal conversation to have, where we're not calling anybody out, but hey, if you are engaged in these conversations with the chatbots, did you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's important at the middle school level. Yep. And so those were just a few of the dilemmas that we pulled from our lessons that have everything you would need to roll this out, whether it be at that stage where this is good for my peers. We all need to get a handle on this. We all need to think about this before we start to do this with students. And as we talk to our peers, what would we like our peers to get out of this? Or what would we like our students to get out of these lessons and these conversations? Would it help my norms and my expectations in my classroom? Would it help, engage families at home with AI in a more confident way? And so we hope that you can grab some of these lessons and start, dabbling with them, checking them out, doing just a piece or two, having these conversations in your buildings. We also are starting to do, organized ed tech tool lists, curating lists of ed tech tools that, incorporate AI, and also, how does this look? What is it all about? And so we have some lists there if you would like to get started in thinking about some of these things we're hearing about in terms of AI use. And so at Common Sense Education, if you really liked what you saw today, and this is just one piece of the many resources that we offer and different program-like things in terms of digital citizenship. There's a whole curriculum involved. There's also some entry activities, quick activities around many more things beyond AI. More of the stuff that we have to start with, as we said in the beginning, around the foundational pieces. And so we do have a program where we can recognize the work that's going on in your classrooms. And we can, say, hey, world, look at XYZ school and what they're doing to make sure their kids are prepared, their families, their staff, around digital citizenship and beyond, and everything that encompasses this. So throw the link in there. If you're interested, please don't hesitate to look further into that. Reach out. We can help you with your individual roadmap or a school roadmap if that's something that you're interested in. And going back, we want to tie it back together. We hope that after this, you are feeling like, hey, I'm doing a lot of these different, skills and habits with my students already. And I have been doing these things, right? We have been pausing and thinking and reflecting when we're consuming things on our, computers or our devices. We are, thinking about lateral reading and the things that I'm consuming. Is it real? Why? What source is this coming from? What does it mean when it comes from that source? So these are all like skills and dispositions that we've been using. We're seeing a lot of different perspectives online, and we have to understand that our students can say, hey, I'm going to agree to disagree, and that's okay. But what's not okay is having hate speech or being mean or rude around a perspective that you don't like or you don't agree with. So, and then taking action, right? At the end of the day, when we're involved in different social media platforms, when we're involved with giving our peers feedback and creating, consuming, and being ethical in these spaces, it really is the foundation to all things when it comes to AI as well. And again, we want to throw the lesson link out there for you. This link that we share will give you access to all of our lessons that are free. They're under 20 minutes, pretty much the feel of what Sue and I did with you today. There's either a video with, questions to discuss, or we give you a dilemma or a scenario to discuss, and you can customize any of these dilemmas and scenarios to fit some of the things that you're grappling with in your buildings or within your professional setting. And also just in thinking about the different dimensions that this touches upon. And so when you think about just the idea of what is it, educating and getting everybody on the same page as to what is AI. And then there's that social emotional dimension. So your SEL initiatives, there's a lot of context that this all could be carried into and kind of continuing those conversations. One of the things we didn't talk about today was the bias and understanding the bias and AI bias. And, Sue, that's a whole nother session in of itself, right? And so thinking about that too, but there are 2 lessons on bias and having students understand the things that they read at first are not always true. And so lots of turnkey quick activities there too, to kind of introduce your classroom to those types of things. Do you want to add anything, Sue?
I think a lot of folks, as I talk to people, these lessons have been available since, October of last year.
Mhm.
Teachers aren't necessarily comfortable using these with students just yet. Well, some of them, I think teachers need to understand it themselves first, right? They're trying to figure out, what does this mean in my life? How do I use this, for my own professional development, for my own lesson creation, for my own workflow. And so for teachers, I think it's important to start just by understanding themselves, and kind of going through some of these lessons and seeing what the basics are. But a lot of this stuff, even though your kids may not be, using AI, generative AI tools in your classroom, they are using generative AI, and AI is influencing the things that they're seeing, the algorithms that push forth all their content on social media and all that stuff. It's a huge part of your kids' lives already. How can you have these conversations and give them the space to be able to understand, articulate, share, analyze, and really understand some of the emotional side of the way that technology influences us? So both for your teachers and for your students, consider going through and just having these conversations so that everybody feels like they're on the same page and not on 2 different sides of the room, right? So, because that's the way it can feel. And most of the time we are all definitely thinking the same thing a lot of times, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Well, we hope you were able to take at least 1 or 2 little tips, activities, maybe something we said, something resonated, gave you a little more confidence in saying, hey, world, I can do this. I can talk about AI in my classroom. And keep yourself some grace, because this is a work in progress. We are learning, and the more conversation you have with others and the more conversation you have around these topics, I promise you, the better it'll feel and the easier it will get. And so without further ado, we want to thank you for joining us today. And we hope that we'll see you next time. And Sue, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to add?
I bet it's very cold in Illinois today. I miss it, and I miss you all. I appreciate everybody here coming today to learn all about all this good stuff for yourselves and your students. So thanks.